last one coming up, you might as well get out of the way now.
Many things. No más. No more. Igual.
You can move along as well, that's it. Move along the bus!
It's a very long dive for me, longest dive I've done. It's almost a kilometre to the end now, well, 925 metres. And I'd forgotten, quite how much of it was at real depth. So you're spending a lot of time at 80 metres, then a chunk of time at 90, and then still at 80 again. And I got onto the bit that Archer had laid last year, and he put 400 metres in, and that takes a while to cover, and a lot of it was at depth. So even on the dive through, I was racking up a lot of deco. I was doing my deep stops coming up on Archer's newly laid line, and it's a nice passage. Lots of big rocks on the floor, a little bit of sand, some sediment, clean washed in places, and big passage. Probably 4, 5, maybe 6, 7, 8 metres wide in places, and very tall and high as well. I got up to -12 where Archer's line finished, and at that point he had the line being laid, belayed with a couple of silk screws. There's actually quite a lot of sand around, and I started doing my deeps. I started doing stops, doing stops at 12 metres, obviously. Belayed, put another silk screw in, another belay, and started laying line from there. A lot of sand, a lot of silk, and I started to think, maybe this doesn't look so good. I expect it to be clean washed or less silt at that point. Carried on laying line from 12 to 9, did my 9-minute to stop. And then, I had basically an hour to surface, an hour at 6 metres as my final stop. Got up to 6 metres and started swimming around. And I managed to follow what I thought was then following a passage, swimming along at about -6, -7 metres, following a left-hand wall. But as I followed it, I realised that actually the right-hand wall was coming into view. And considering the passage had been very wide previously, it surprised me. And as I kept going forwards, actually, rather than the right-hand wall sort of coming in, the cave actually just pinched together, and it actually closed down. And I thought, I've obviously just missed something. So, still around -6, off gassing. I managed to reel back in, dump the line reel in the middle of the passage, and have a bit of a swim around. Still basically staying at -6 metres, shining my light in the ceiling and looking for a way on. And despite my best efforts and spending about 15 minutes in that area, I just couldn't see anything. I couldn't find a way forward. So I thought, well, if we come up here and it's got very silty, chances are I might have missed the way on. So decided to actually, cut the line and head back and try and spot what we might have missed on the way up. The problem is, as I've done lots of deco stops on the way up to that section, I've been spending a lot of time in the water, hanging around the same place. It's quite sandy and a lot of sediment in the water. And going back, it was really hard to see where I might have missed. So although I headed back quite slowly, kind of keep my eyes peeled, I just couldn't spot anything. Ended up down at sort of -50, basically on the way back, and kind of committed at that point to heading back. Wasn't really realistic to keep searching. It was already going to be a very long dive. I got back and started doing deep stops from about -63 metres. Had a whole series of stops, about 3 hours of deco. To come up with 2 hours at -6 metres. I was very lucky that I had a support diver. I had Laura Trowbridge here, and she was able to come in, take some of the cylinders off me, and just be support for me whilst I was in the water. Got a heated vest, plugged that in to keep me warm, and I listened to an underwater MP3 player to kill a couple of hours at 6 metres. Got out and pretty exhausted. Spent about half an hour just sitting by the sump pool before I climbed up the slope to get changed. And then we took it real easy. Had to package up the stuff, make sure nothing got washed away in case the cave started to flood, and then a slow retreat to the surface.
So what was the maximum depth you got to then?
93 metres is the elbow of the sump.
And the sand on the bottom you was on about, is that fairly silt-free?
So when you're at the deepest section of the cave, when you're clearly in the main drag, there's less sand, and there's actually some pebbles and some cobbles and stuff.
So there's a fair flow there, obviously. Being.
I think there's a decent amount of flow in the main section. But where I'd got up to the sort of shallower stuff, where I was hanging around at 6 metres, there was less flow, and stuff was definitely the visibility was definitely getting worse. You know, I spent, I say, 15 minutes in this chamber, and actually by the time I came to cut the line, the vis was really poor. I could only see, a couple of feet.
And there's no water space, so there's no airspace above you?
No airspace at all above me.
No.
Which is, in a way, it's kind of a worse situation to be in terms of length of dive. You know, you come up, you get to 6 metres, you hang around for 15 minutes, you don't get a chance to go to surface to kind of have a breather, maybe spend an hour or hour or two on the surface was what I'd have hoped. So just have to turn back, and obviously then you're into really long dives.
And you couldn't really go above 6 metres because that would have meant extra deco stops and all sorts of problems.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't worth it.
No, unfortunately, I could see where my light was. My light was strong enough and the visibility was good enough that I could see the ceiling. I got 6 metres, I could clearly see the roof. I was swimming around looking for that shimmering surface, kind of sussing out, right, where I'm going to go next. And there's just nothing there. And I must admit, I had a little chuckle to myself because you spend all this time focused on, right, we're at -12, it's going to go to surface, it's going to go to surface, and you get to -6, and and it's not there, and that's what caves do to you. You're so convinced one thing's going to happen, and it does the complete opposite. So I had to kind of laugh in a way, but I was very disappointed not to surface.
So what's the plan now then?
I think to make this cave easier to do, I think to give ourselves a better chance, I think bring your scooters in as a secret. You're spending such a long time, or you're doing a good long distance at real depth, you're racking up a huge amount of decompression. So a scooter through there will be perfect.
It's big enough.
Yeah, the cave's easily big enough. The vis isn't great, but as long as you're good on your scootering skills and you stick close to the line, you'll be fine. And I really think that'll cut hours and hours off the trip. If I'd have surfaced, it would have been a 2.5 hour dive through, which isn't a crazy dive. That's quite achievable. And then if you spend some time on the surface, you've got a 2.5, maybe 3 hour dive back. Right. So in both cases, not too bad. And you put a scooter into that, and suddenly you've got an hour dive through and an hour and a half dive back, and then you can afford to spend a load of time as well, looking for the way on. And
you've also got less effort, so you've probably got less gas anyway.
Yeah.
A bit more safety margin, in other words.
Yeah, you're more efficient. Yeah, you're consuming less oxygen, a rebreather. There's a load of things, and if something does go wrong, then you've got a better chance of getting out of there quicker.
Yep.
So the hassle of bringing scooters in is a lot of hassle, big heavy lumps of stuff to get in here, but I think that's probably the next step. I think it's worth putting the effort in. Yeah,
we can find a way up. There's just that where the rope climb is, which is a bit difficult, but we're sure we can find ways around that.
One option that I considered was actually diving the scooters through, because I need to look at the sump index and talk perhaps to Rupert and think about those other sumps. But there's a series of sumps to get to this main upstream one. It's not worth it generally, but if you were going to struggle to fit stuff and you had scooters, even if it was an extra couple of dives and you could actually get them in, underwater, it might actually be more efficient.
Yeah.
So.